I preface my remarks this morning acknowledging that I speak to you from a place of unwarranted privilege. It is hard to see a star when you are hungry for security and respite from grief, and in the midst of a pandemic of the soul. I say this in part because there might be more of us than usual who, like Clark Wells, would respond negatively to the demand that we, quote, pause and be more appreciative of life, unquote. Busyness, however, can be a trait, or so we like to think. There have always been the doers and there have always been the dreamers, and they've always had firm attitudes about each other. So be honest. Before now, before these times, which kind of person were you? Were you the kind who is determined to get things done under any circumstances, or the kind who will stop and marvel at a star? I know, by nighttime you're too tired to look up at the skies. But bear with me, because you see, you were made for this. You were made for joy, not just to absorb food and expend energy and to sleep. You were given in myriad ways the capacity to appreciate beauty and humor and express your delight. Even as infants, we look longer at and listen closer to and reach for things that appeal to us. Proportions and colors and sounds and textures and tastes can make us laugh. Of course, babies do have the strangest sense of humor, but I digress. I often wonder, however, if children are really closer to what is precious, and if that is something that we lose as we get older. I hate to think that. We are moved by things that have nothing to do with our survival and everything to do with the quality of life. There's an old Chinese proverb, except I'd love to find out if this is really true. But the proverb goes, if you have 2 pennies left in your pocket, buy a loaf of bread with one and a lily with the other. I'd like to tell you a story that kind of expands on that idea. And it's the story about Joshua Bell, who's a famous violinist. And it took place in January of 2007. And the setup was a reporter from the Washington Post set Joshua Bell up outside a metro station in downtown DC. And Joshua Bell played incognito, mind you. He played for 45 minutes and performed a classical set of pieces that were just extraordinary. And people 2 days later probably paid about $100 to see him do the same pieces in concert. But there he was playing incognito. And as you can imagine, people during rush hour were on their way to work, and most of them didn't or could not stop to listen. There were a few. There were a few people who actually stood and listened to the whole thing, but I tend to imagine that they were privileged and could get to work at any time in the morning. But the ones that lingered, that wanted to stay and listen, were the children. And the reporter made note of a particular, what looked to be a 3-year-old boy who just stopped stock still, staring at Belle until his mother literally shoved him, pushed him towards her, towards the stairs that would lead to her platform. And after this first kid, the reporter started noticing that a lot of the kids were doing the same thing, and they were dragged by their parents off to wherever they had to be. So there is video of this if you want to go to the Washington Post and search for Joshua Bell at the Metro, and you can see for yourself and listen for yourself. But the reporter was asking questions, and one of the questions was, do we perceive beauty? Do we perceive it? Do we stop to appreciate it, especially when it's a place where we would never expect it? And I have to say that I see this now as a moment that was as much about classism as it was about paying attention to the classics. All these people had to go to work, or they had to be somewhere, or they wouldn't be there. And it would have been a privilege to be able to stay and listen to Joshua Bell. So I kind of keep that in the back of my mind. But I'm still thinking about those children. And I'm also thinking that harmonies can pierce the heart, even for it's just a moment, and make one's day as they're rushing towards their train. Would the Washington Post reporter have realized that? I don't think so. But harmonies are a necessary part of life. And to have them, to listen to them, is working magic into your everyday life. I think they're as necessary to us as light and warmth and water. And I'd like to think about what that means. What that means is that we are created not just to survive, but to thrive. And we need these things. We need that star to thrive. If we can reach out to a star, we can rebel against routine. There's a hymn that we were singing not too long ago, Bread and Roses. The words were written by James Oppenheim and published in 1911. And there's one line that I really love: hearts as well as bodies. Hearts starve as well as bodies. Give us bread, but give us roses. And I realize we need dimension in life to get through our days. Not just one-dimensional, go to work and come home and sleep and do the same thing day after day after day. We need something richer to look forward to. We need to take a moment and watch the dawn unfold like glory. We need to count a mockingbird's songs, that bird in the tree that's singing its heart out for us. We need to be able to marvel at how absurd everything can be and laugh rather than cry. Because aside from rebelling against routine to make life fun and worth it, there's something even more important that's going on for us. To be glad at a star is to rebel against despair. To rebel against despair. And I think of the words of another child, Anne Frank. And when you read her diary, you're very aware of this interaction between her and her mom. Her mom doesn't get her. Her mom says, in Anne's own words, her advice in the face of melancholy is think about all the suffering in the world and be thankful that you're not a part of it. And Anne's response to her was, at such moments, I don't think about all the misery, but about all the beauty that still remains. That's a way of thinking that I wish we could all adopt. for all that we are wired to appreciate beauty when we remember to, I am very aware that we can also habituate ourselves to misery. I know this all too well. If you have ever been touched by depression, you'll know what I mean. It is more than anything else, this numbing inability to be moved by the stars. And right now, in these times, it is very prevalent. And I want you to remember this as you're interacting with folks. Everyday worry and turmoil all around us has seen to that. So when we are given the chance to experience something of beauty and power, it's more important than ever to let it relieve us of our burdens, even if it can only be for just a moment. That moment has a power of its own, especially if it's shared. And that's what this season is all about, isn't it? Not waiting for a mystery to be revealed, but seeking out opportunities to know it. To see a star is to rebel not only against routine, not only against despair, but also against fear. And I'm reminded of my last story of the morning for you, and that is the story of the cellist of Sarajevo. Vedran Smilovic was the principal cellist for the Sarajevo Opera and for the Philharmonic and the National Theater and other institutions. He grew up in a musical family that was used to holding concerts, outdoor public concerts. And he was living in Sarajevo during the siege of his city that started in April of '92. The Bosnian Serbs shelled Sarajevo. They had snipers positioned and they were firing rockets into the city, into the heart of the city. And on May 27th, an artillery shell exploded in front of a bakery while people were standing in line, and 22 people were killed. People sought shelter and were hiding inside the ruins of their buildings. But the next day, Smilovic dressed in his formal wear for a classical concert, and he carried a chair and his cello out into the courtyard, and he began to play Tommaso Albinoni's Adagio in G minor as a memorial to the massacre. There was still sniper fire and shelling, but he played on anyway. He stopped and he got off and removed his chair and his cello and went into the shelter. But he went back out again every day for 21 more days and performed this. He was smart and he varied the time so that it wasn't the same time of day that he was playing, because he realized that he was a target. He played at graveyards and he played at other sites of destruction from the shelling as well. What happened to him? In '93, he was able to flee the war and he left for the safety of Ireland. And today he still lives in Northern Ireland. There have been movies and books written about him. And I think of him at these times when I think of being able to rise above the devastation and look for the star. And what I wouldn't give for every child of every age, of every place, to be able to be glad at a star. So I ask you in this time and in this season to choose for yourself, to choose to find something remarkable every day, even something small and ordinary, that you will let take you away from all of the doubt and the fear for tomorrow. This doesn't have to be a season of waiting. This is a season to notice a star shining bright in the sky. This is a season to notice a flame which does not go out. And it is a season to find a blessing as if life, your life, depended on it. Thank you for listening.